Good day, fellow barbarians. I am Johan from a heavy metal band Vanquisher, and I'm here today to tell you why I think Conan the Barbarian is the most heavy metal thing ever. So, I thought we would start with an introduction to how I got to know Conan. Just like many other people, I got to know Conan through the 1982 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Watched it at a friend's place. I thought it was super cool because I really like fantasy and Vikings, and they had all these battle scenes and it was cool stuff going on. So I got a bit curious about Conan. So what I decided to do is that I wanted to figure out where does Conan come from. And I found out that the source of Conan is the author Robert E. Howard from Cross Plains, Texas. And he wrote literature about Conan. It was short stories published in like pulp magazines. So I took it upon myself to read about this. I collected first The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, or Cimmerian, The Bloody Crown of Conan, and The Conquering Sword of Conan. These are all collection books. It has all the Conan stories inside, if you're interested in reading them. But I thought it was super cool, the stories. And the thing is, I'm also a person who's very into heavy metal. So I started realizing when I was reading Conan that shit, this is the most heavy metal character ever, and the reason why I'm going to tell you. Starting off, when people think about where heavy metal came from, people usually say Black Sabbath. That's where it all started. Some people will say it started with Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin, but Black Sabbath generally is pretty accepted to be where it came from. And I have looked up interviews with Black Sabbath where they talk about their upbringing in Birmingham, and that it wasn't a very nice place to be. And so you have these lyrics that talk about, it's a sort of criticizing society and civilization in general. And what I found was that there was some similarity between the Conan literature I have read and what these bands are saying in the heavy metal movement. So if we talk about civilization to begin with, and to criticize civilization, that is very much what Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan, did. If you read about Robert E. Howard in this book, Conan the Phenomenon, that basically describes anything related to Conan, you will find that they talk about Robert E. Howard growing up in Cross Plains, Texas, and being very displeased with civilization because that town was reliant upon the local oil industry. And so its population would go up and down based on how well the kind of oil business was going. And so he will say in the book that when you grow up next to such a home environment, or you have such a home environment rather, that relies upon local oil, the industry, it will teach you that life is a pretty rotten thing. Also you see in the Conan literature this criticizing of civilization. Conan himself is the very opposition to everything civilized. He's brutal, and he says what he feels, and he doesn't play any games. There is nothing sophisticated there. And that was interesting to me. So I could draw a parallel between what's being said in heavy metal lyrics. Very typically, there's this uprising towards the authority. You have, for example, Twisted Sister saying that we're not gonna take it, and they're usually have music videos talking about that there's someone trying to put them down, and they're not gonna take it. And the same is the case with Conan, actually. Conan will not back off from a fight if you mess with him, and he's not gonna take shit from anyone, and that to me is very cool. So there's also something else that I was thinking about when I was getting introduced to Conan, and it's the imagery, how things look. And particularly I have during these later years come to think of the game Brutal Legend. If you don't know about it, it's a heavy metal game. Like, fuck, it's they basically said we're going to make the most heavy metal game ever. It has Lemmy in it, Ozzy Osbourne, Rob Halford, lots of, all the guys. And so I'm thinking, if they make a heavy metal game, then everything about it must be heavy metal to its very core, okay? And on this cover art, what I see is a black-haired character with super big muscles and a weapon, and everything is super epic and cool. And that really leads me to think about Conan, really. And another thing, the lead, or rather the design of Brutal Legend, how they wanted it to look. They said that they took a lot of inspiration from Frank Frazetta, and he made this picture too, actually. And Frank Frazetta is the most notorious Conan painter of all time. People think of Conan and the pulp magazines, think of Frank Frazetta. So I'm thinking, with all of these things in mind, with the attitude of not taking shit from anyone, with the imagery portraying muscular heroes and great power, I'm thinking that there's a very close connection there. And that's why I wanted to make a band that where we just sing about Conan, because it seems to me like the most natural thing to do ever. You have bands like Blind Guardian talking about Lord of the Rings as a very established thing. So I'm thinking, why is there not something more related to Conan out there? And there is a little bit, but I do not think it has gone deep enough into the literature. And that's why I want to put that out into the world. So I will also leave you with a reflection about Conan. Here's the thing, most people will see that Conan seems to just be about fighting, and there's swords, and there's magical women with big breasts everywhere, and like that's all there is to it. But I don't think that's true. Sure, on the outside, if you would say that Conan was a book, that's the cover of that book. However, I have read a lot about Conan. I have read every story there is, and I learned most of what there is to know about the author as well. Everything that's related to Conan and the author. And I have found that the best way to get the most out of Conan, really, I think, is to not see Conan as some sort of realistic character, because he isn't. Like, he goes out and just conquers whatever he wants. He seems to be able to withstand every challenge, and that's just not a realistic person. However, if we stop thinking of Conan as a person, we think of Conan as an idea, and we think about the fact that Robert E. Howard grew up being bullied, and he stood up against his bullies by learning boxing. So there was some sort of violent solution to that, and that's reflected in Conan. And the idea behind everything, to me, is that Conan is basically saying that, or this whole literature is saying that you can go out into the world with what you have been given by birth. You don't need to pray to any gods. You don't need anyone's approval to do what you want to do. And you go forth in life and you take what you want, and what you want from this life. And I think that's a very cool idea. And that's what I think is the true message behind Conan the Barbarian. So, thank you for listening.